Hello and welcome to Foundation TV. Today we are going to start our new series which is focused on corporate environment. Series which is going to bring to you corporate leaders, leaders from academia and other professionals. Before we start this series, I have a question for you. Have you ever dreamt of getting promoted at your workplace? Have you ever thought of leading a team or desired to lead a department or to lead the company? I'm sure some of us have dreamt of those things, and I'm sure some of us have accomplished those goals as well. While rest of us may be still dreaming about those things and may have some questions which may not be answered. In the past, the way to seek those answers was to find a mentor or to find a friend who has been successful. Well, going forward, you have a third avenue, which is the avenue of your choice, that is Foundations TV. At Foundations TV, we plan to bring to you the professionals who have accomplished a lot in their field and best of all, who are ready and willing to share their knowledge and information with you. So, with that theme, today with us, we have a very young entrepreneur, a guy who has accomplished a lot, an amazing amount of stuff in a very young age. If I have to give his background, I'll just give you a few references. He did his MBA from Babson School after he graduated from his engineering school. Post his graduation, he started working into software jobs and eventually led executive positions at Computer Associates and BMC Software, and eventually jumped on to become an entrepreneur and a private investor. The best part of his story is his success does not end there. His success starts from there. Once he became a private investor, he went on to invest in many companies that are focused on cloud computing, IT infrastructure, and data security. Two of his investments got acquired by Cisco and Novell, and he has few more investments in and around Boston area. This guy is very passionate about cricket, number one, and number two, he's very passionate about sharing his ideas, his thoughts with each one of us. So, with that background, please welcome to the Foundations TV studio my friend, Mr. Saqib Syed. He is the CEO of Array IQ, and he is an advisor and a chief mentor at many other companies. So, Saqib, welcome to our studio. I am not sure if I really did a true justice to your background with the amount of stuff you have accomplished. So, would you like to elaborate if I have missed something, which I'm sure I have?
First of all, Neeraj, I would like to thank you for inviting me to your studio. It's a great opportunity for me to share my thoughts with the viewers. And I think you did a great job on my background. And a few things that I would like to add about my background is specifically around entrepreneurship. I never thought about entrepreneurship when I initially came to this country back in early 90s. So I enrolled in a master's program at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And then after that, my first goal was to find a job in United States where I could move on further in my career. And the first thing was to get a green card so that I could accomplish what I needed to in terms of the passion I had for the technology. So from then on, there's been a lot of help that I have got specifically from mentors. So one thing that I would say is, during that process, I was debating whether I should continue working for a bigger company versus making a jump towards entrepreneurship. So the only thing I would like to add is specifically, I've never thought about entrepreneurship in my first 10 years in my career, but later on, the situation was such that, I got dragged into it because of the wonderful mentors that I got from a lot of other entrepreneurial organizations you have around Boston.
Great. So, your thought process just evolved as you went along and just enjoy the journey.
Absolutely. I believe as an entrepreneur, you should be able to adapt to changes. So, one of the things that I learned over a period of time, my mind was all set when I initially started working, but during the process, I saw technology change quite a bit, and that also changed the thought process in me that for me to accomplish what I need to keep up with the changes, I need to change myself. So I went in and specifically thought about what I should be doing to specifically get into those areas that I needed to. And I wanted to be in data center, infrastructure, security, and cloud computing at that point was not so prevalent.
Right.
So it was more about internet.
Right.
And I can share with you a story specifically when I graduated from my university with a master's program. I had an option to go to a startup at that time was pioneering the entire internet. So it was a company called Netscape, and it was about a few people in the company. And at that time, I made a choice to come here to Boston to join a bigger company, Digital Equipment Corporation, which was a multi-billion-dollar company. So you can imagine for someone who has started his career at a big company to come and talk about entrepreneurship and investing in smaller companies and startups, it's like a tremendous change.
Great. So the lesson learned for all of our audience, and especially the fresh graduates and their parents, is if your kids are graduating and they want to go to a small company rather than a big company like digital, let them follow their dreams. Big companies may not be there forever. That is not true for small companies either, but let them follow their dreams. You never know where they end up being. So let's ask the first question. Saqib, I mentor many people out in the industry, and almost everyone asks a question, should I go for an MBA or not? And I have given them the advice based on my perspective, but you are a guy who has gone through an MBA. So what's your perspective on value of MBA in short term and long term?
Thank you, Neeraj. That's a great question. I've always I reflect back on my career on specifically the things that I did and the decision making at that point, because there's always that 2020 hindsight. When you look at it today, it looks a little different. But at that time, when I had a growing family, I had to make a decision whether or not to do an MBA. And I'm sure a lot of folks who want to progress in their career will be asking the same question. So let me throw some light on what were the factors that led me into doing an MBA and whether that was specifically useful in what I wanted to do in the future. So thinking back, we were just acquired by a bigger company. So I was part of that big company, and I was getting restless at that time, and I could not see a very clear career path in that company, because specifically when companies get acquired, the acquiring company would like to have their own people in key management roles. And at that time, I really thought that maybe I should look at it from a bigger perspective. What is the goal that I wanted to accomplish? And look at it rather than from a small company or that particular company I was working on, look at it from a bigger perspective. So I had to really convince my boss at the company that I would add a lot of value if I did an MBA, and I wanted to move specifically into the mergers and acquisition side. So I used an argument with my boss to convince my boss that I could do an MBA part-time and still do my job at that time. And those were the times when like people were moving from one job to another easily. So my boss was very keen to keep me in that role that he had, and he allowed me to do an MBA and also sponsored me for an MBA program that helped me a lot eventually in my career. But let me answer that question on whether MBA really is one of the key factors or not. I should say that if you're an entrepreneur, your ability to adapt to change matters a lot more than what you actually learn from your education. Education is important, But what you do after you finish your MBA or after you finish your master's is more important than the program itself. And one of the things that I learned when I did my MBA in entrepreneurship was exactly that. So I was so energized when I finished my MBA that I said that this has really given me what I need to go accomplish what I came here to do, right? And so I went off and started getting involved with many startups. And that kind of was the formation phase for me to understand startups and how they grow. That really led me to becoming a private investor later in my career.
Great. So, if I have to sum up your response, MBA or master's in anything is an education that is valuable to everybody. That gives you a formation of a framework of thought process. But unless you apply that knowledge that you have acquired in school, you cannot really realize the value of that. Did I say it properly, what you wanted to convey?
Absolutely, Neeraj. I think you summarized that well. So we have to definitely, when we talk to our youth and the budding entrepreneurs, we need to inculcate in those entrepreneurs. It's about applying your thought and applying your knowledge that matters more, and that's what entrepreneurs are good at. They make things happen, and they're getting into uncharted waters, and they have that ability to execute in those uncharted waters and deliver value. And if we can really get our youth and budding entrepreneurs to do that, we'll create a lot of value in United States.
Great. I'm itching to ask one more follow-up question on the same topic. Usually it is said that if you go for an MBA at a Ivy League, it's a great door opener for you in your career. But if you're in your career for 10, 15 years and you have led teams, led functional teams and led companies, then MBA may not add as much value. What do you say to that thought process?
Um, I think it all differs, right? Depends on how you think about that MBA program. And Ivy League MBA is definitely very important, especially if you want to get into the big Wall Street firms, which no longer exist at this point, right? They were tainted a few years back. And so then definitely in terms of managing organizations in a bigger company, large corporates, they do look for Ivy League MBAs and MBAs from one of these top schools. But I would kind of recommend that you seek your passion. Sometimes the smaller schools will have programs that really are one of the best in their specific areas. So you kind of understand what is it that you're looking for and seek those programs, you'll have better results. And that's exactly what I did when I was looking for an MBA program back in late 90s, to look for a specific program that really was in my area of interest.
Great. So again, it goes back to the same thing. Follow your passion, and if you find a program that meets your passion, go for it. So, Saqib, you have transitioned from being a software engineer to being a mergers and acquisition guy. Usually, merger and acquisition requires skills which are pretty strong in financial background. So, help our audience understand what skills do you need to be a M&A guy with no finance background?
Absolutely. I do believe that mergers and acquisitions specifically require different areas of expertise. You start with the market, the strategy, the product, and then the finance. And then comes the cultural integration of the company when it gets acquired. So there are a lot of different aspects of M&A, and I would recommend folks who want to get into that specific area to look into where they are today. If they are on the strategy side or on the product side or on the marketing side, they could get involved in M&A. M&A is usually held very close to a few important people in the company. One of the key aspects is for you to get into that small circle, and that requires having a relationship specifically with those key people. And there are different ways to go build that relationship, and that comes through some good ideas. If you're on the product, marketing, or on the strategy side, and you have good ideas to contribute towards M&A, there will be people willing to accept those ideas. And once you become part of that group, you're going to learn finance along the way. I do believe that finance is one of the very small components of M&A. So it's basically those other 3 or 4 aspects that I believe are important when you want to really move into M&A from wherever you stand today.
Great. So these are great ideas that we are sharing among us and along with our audience. I think my last question for today would be, you have been an entrepreneur. What suggestion or advice would you give to budding entrepreneurs out there who are listening and watching our show?
Um, Great question again, Neeraj. I get asked this question in most of the panels that I'm on, and every time I answer the question, it makes me think. So I do believe the biggest asset that you could have to becoming an entrepreneur is your ability to adapt to change. And if you're able to do that, and if you're honest to yourself, then you would be able to accomplish a lot. And remember, entrepreneurs are the ones who make things happen. So you should focus on execution while you have a clear thought process, and making sure that you leverage all the resources around you to bring value, and that's what you should focus on. I do see that most people who come and ask me that question, they get stuck on the fact that they're not able to go ahead and execute on that thought process. They get stuck at the thought process. So I do believe that execution capability and ability to go ahead and perform in uncharted waters is what makes you an entrepreneur.
Great response. Great response. So I'm sure our audience would have learned a lot from today's session in terms of what's the value of education, what's the value of MBA, what's the value of following your dreams, and helping and having your parents allow you to follow your dreams, whether it is a big company or a small company, and how to transition career from product, strategy, technology, finance to whatever field you are in, to mergers and acquisition, because many people desire to go to that field. So, Saqib, thanks a lot for sharing these thoughts with our audience. It was a wonderful session, and we enjoyed having you in our studio.
Thank you, Neeraj, for having me over at the Foundations TV. I enjoyed the discussion. I'm hoping that I'm able to inspire some of the entrepreneurs who are planning to form their own companies. And remember, you always start small. So, have dreams that are big, but you start small. And I would really encourage budding entrepreneurs to take that big leap and jump into it once you've given a good thought process. And another thing that I would like to add, I've learned a lot to becoming an entrepreneur by playing a sport called cricket, which is very predominant back home in India. So I grew up playing cricket, and I'm quite involved working with youth here in the sport of cricket. So maybe next time I would like to talk about cricket. If anyone is interested on how to apply some of the principles that you have in sports to entrepreneurship, I would be glad to talk to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.